Hello dear students, I Sana Asif, Assistant Professor of English at Bhopal School of Social Sciences, will explain you history of prose. 17th century prose. The development of English prose in the 17th century can be divided into two periods. The first one is prose in the age of Milton. The second is prose during Restoration. During the mid-17th century, or rather the age of Milton, the development of prose carried on from the previous age. In spite of the hampering effects of the civil strife, the prose output was copious and excellent in kind. There was a notable advance in the sermon writing. Pamphlets were abundant, and history, politics, philosophy, and miscellaneous kinds were well represented. There was a remarkable advance in prose style. The prose of this age was cultivated in a style very different from the Elizabethan and 16th century prose. The prose writers used a grand style, which Bacon and Hooker never anticipated. It was loose in structure, overcolored, elaborate, and wayward. The writers indulged too freely in the use of Latinized words of classical constructions. Despite some drawbacks, the prose of this period has many qualities. It has the freshness of form. The 17th century is the first great period of modern English prose, when it was forming under the classical influence but independent of the French impact. In subject matter, it represents the self-conscious and personal interest of the time. It was also a period of biography, autobiography, history, and personal essays. The prose of this age possesses a strongly religious or theological and philosophical character. The important prose writers of this period are Robert Burton, Sir Thomas Browne, Jeremy Taylor, Thomas Fuller, Jack Walton, and the last is John Milton. Now comes Robert Burton, who was born in the year 1577 and died in the year 1613. Robert Burton, he made notable contribution by the Anatomy of Melancholy in the year 1621. It is an elaborate and discursive study of melancholy, its species and kinds, its causes, results, and cure. The book, though labored and saturnine in tone, shows an underlying common sense and a true sympathy with humanity. Its learning is immense and unconventional, being drawn from many rare authors. Its humor curiously crabbed, subdued, and ironical, and its melancholy, though pervading, is not oppressive. The diction has a colloquial naturalness. The enormous sentences packed with quotations and allusions are loosely knit. Both as a stylist and as a personality, Burton occupies his own niche in English prose. Sir Thomas Browne, who was born in the year 1605 and died in 1682. Sir Thomas Browne, born at London and educated at Winchester and Oxford, studied medicine, practiced at Oxfordshire, travelled abroad and received his degree of MD at Leiden. Almost alone among his contemporary writers, Browne seems to have been unaffected by the commotions of the time. His prose works, produced during some of the hottest years of civil strife, are oblivious of the unrest. The Garden of Cyrus in the year 1658 is a treatise on the Queen Conch. His last work, Christian Morals, was published after his death. Browne was a great literary stylist. He shows the ornate style in its richest bloom. His diction is strongly Latinized, and he has the scholastic habit of introducing Latin tags and references. His sentences are carefully wrought and artistically combined into paragraphs. The diction has a richness of effect unknown among other English prose writers. Now comes the Jeremy Taylor, who was born in the year 1613 and died in the year 1667. He is the most important literary divine of the age, a learned, voluble and impressive preacher who carried the same quality into his prose works, which consisted of tracts, sermons and theological books. His popular works were The Liberty of Prophesying in 1647, Holy Living in 1650 and Holy Dying in 1651. In his writings, he is found of quotations and allusions and of florid. Rhetorical figures such as simile, exclamation and apostrophe, and his language is abundant, melodious and pleasing. Now the next comes Thomas Fuller. Thomas Fuller was born in the year 1608 and died in 1661. He had an original and penetrating mind. His literary works are of great interest and value. His serious historical books include The History of the Holy War, which was written in the year 1639, dealing with the Crusades, and the Church History of Britain in 1655. Among his pamphlets are Good Thoughts in Bad Times, which was written in 1645, and Alarum to the Counties of England and Wales, which was written in 1660. The work that has given him his reputation is The Worthies of England, published after his death by his son in 1662. The next is John Milton. John Milton was born in the year 1608 and died in 1674. He was not only a great poet, but also a finest writer of prose, whose work is among the finest controversial writing in the language. Most of his prose was written during the middle period of his life, which is 1640 to 1660. The prose works have an unusual interest because they have a direct bearing on either his personal business or public interest. In all, he has written 25 pamphlets, that is 21 in English and 4 in Latin. He wrote his pamphlets on themes like divorce, episcopacy, politics, education, liberty of the press, etc. His great prose work is Areopagitica, which was written in 1644, which is a notable and impassioned plea for the liberty of the press. While considering the prose style of Milton, we must keep in mind how it was occasioned. His pamphlets were cast off at the center of any controversy and precipitated into print while some topic was in urgent debate either in Milton's or in public mind. Hence, they are tempestuous and disordered in method and voluble, violent and lexicant style. They reveal intense zeal and pugnacity, a mind at once spacious in ideals and intolerant in application, a rich fancy, and a capacious scholarship. They lack humor, proportion, and restraint, but in spite of these defects, they are among the greatest prose compositions in the English language. The other prose writers in the age of Milton were Isaac Walton, Earl of Clarendon, and Thomas Hobbes. The period is almost devoid of narrative prose of lighter sort. It is quite rich in sermons, pamphlets, and other miscellaneous prose. The period has been called as the Golden Age of English Pulpit. The violent religious strife of the time has a great flow of sermon writing, which is marked with eloquence, learning, and strong argument. In addition to Jeremy Taylor and Fuller, we notice Robert South, Isaac Barrow, and Richard Baxter. A number of philosophical works were also written on the moral side. There are the works of Brown on the political, those of Hobbes, and on the religious side, the books of John Hales. In historical prose, the works of Clarendon and Fuller stood preeminent. So this was all about the age of Milton. Now the second part, which I'll be covering in the next lecture, is prose during Restoration. Thank you.